You know that moment when you realize your future in-laws think you're a charity case? Yeah. Welcome to my Tuesday afternoon in Austin, Texas, where the BBQ is legendary. The traffic is hell. And apparently, I'm the walking embodiment of their son's questionable life choices. I'm Maeve Dalton, 30 years old, and according to Clarissa and Barrett Ramsey, I'm exactly the kind of gold-digging disaster their precious Jasper needs to avoid. Funny thing about assumptions, they make everyone look ridiculous, especially when they're dead wrong. Let me set the scene. It's a Tuesday in mid-October, one of those perfect Austin days where the temperature finally drops below 90, and you remember why people move here in the first place. I'm wearing a simple navy dress from Target. $15 on clearance, thank you very much, and flats I bought online for $20. My engagement ring? A beautiful vintage piece Jasper found at an estate sale. Not flashy, but meaningful. To me, anyway. To his mother, Clarissa, it might as well have come from a gumball machine. The Ramseys had invited me to lunch at Sullivan's, this upscale steakhouse downtown where the waiters wear ties, and the wine list costs more than my monthly coffee budget. Just a casual get-together, Clarissa had said on the phone, her voice dripping with that syrupy southern hospitality that always sounds slightly threatening. We'd love to get to know our future daughter-in-law better. Red flag number 1. Nothing involving Clarissa Ramsey is casual. Red flag number 2. Barrett, Jasper's father, was already seated when I arrived, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. He's a tall, imposing guy in his early 60s, the kind who probably played football in college and never quite got over it. Salt and pepper hair, expensive suit, and a handshake that feels like a test. Clarissa, on the other hand, is all blonde highlights and Botox, dressed in what I'm guessing is St. John, or some other label I'm supposed to recognize. She's 58, but looks 45, and she knows it. The second I sat down, her eyes did a full scan. Hair, dress, shoes, purse, ring. I practically heard the calculator in her brain tallying up my net worth and finding it severely lacking. "Maeve, darling," she began, that smile never reaching her eyes. "You look comfortable." Translation: "You look poor." "Thanks," I said brightly. "I believe in dressing for the occasion. Casual lunch, casual clothes." Barrett cleared his throat, a sound that would become very familiar over the next hour. "So, Maeve, Jasper mentioned you work at a coffee shop." "I'm a barista at Cosmic Coffee on South Congress," I confirmed. "Best cold brew in Austin if you're ever in the neighborhood." Clarissa's laugh was like wind chimes in a horror movie. "How charming. And you've been doing that for how long?" 3 years. 3 years. She repeated it like I'd just confessed to a crime. "And before that?" "I traveled, did some volunteer work, figured out what I wanted to do with my life." What I didn't mention, the traveling was to places like Bali, Paris, and Tokyo. The volunteer work was funding an entire after-school program in East Austin, and figuring out what I wanted to do with my life meant realizing I didn't need to do anything at all because my trust fund could support several lifetimes of latte art. But why ruin the surprise? Barrett leaned forward, attempting what I assume he thought was a paternal expression. "Look, Maeve, we're just going to be straight with you because we care about our son. Jasper is used to a certain standard of living. He grew up with advantages. Private schools, country club, family vacations in Europe. Are you prepared to provide that kind of lifestyle?" I blinked. "I'm sorry. Am I marrying Jasper or auditioning to be his personal ATM?" Clarissa's smile tightened. "Don't be defensive, dear. We're simply concerned about compatibility. Financial stress is the #1 cause of divorce, you know." "Funny you should mention financial stress," Barrett interjected, signaling the waiter for another scotch. "We've had our share lately. Jasper's consulting business. He probably hasn't told you this, wanting to be all independent. But it nearly went under 6 months ago." My heart rate picked up. 6 months ago. That timeline sounded very familiar. Barrett continued, oblivious to my sudden attention. "We were absolutely desperate. The business was hemorrhaging money. Clients were jumping ship, and Jasper was about to lose everything he'd built. We tried to help, but even we didn't have that kind of liquid capital sitting around." "How much are we talking?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. $2.5 million, he said, like he was announcing a terminal diagnosis. Can you imagine? That's what it took to keep the business afloat. We had to bring in an outside investor, some LLC called Dalton Ventures. Very hush-hush. All NDAs and confidentiality agreements. Saved Jasper's rear end, but God, the strings attached. The restaurant suddenly felt very warm. Clarissa jumped back in, clearly eager to return to her main agenda, getting rid of me. The point is, Maeve, our son has obligations, responsibilities. He needs a partner who can contribute equally. Someone from a similar background. Do you understand what we're saying? Oh, I understood perfectly. They wanted me gone. They thought I was some broke barista who'd somehow trapped their successful son into marriage. They assumed I was after his money, his status, his name. The irony was so thick I could have spread it on toast. Let me make sure I'm hearing this correctly, I said slowly, setting down my water glass. You're concerned that I'm not good enough for Jasper, that I don't come from money, that I can't provide the lifestyle he deserves. We're just being practical, Barrett said, somewhat defensively. And this investor, Dalton Ventures, they saved Jasper's business with $2.5 million? Yes, about 6 months ago, Clarissa confirmed. Why do you ask? This was it. The moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating since this ridiculous lunch began. I could have let it go. Could have played nice, changed the subject, and waited for them to figure it out on their own eventually. But where's the fun in that? I leaned back in my chair, crossed my arms, and smiled. That's interesting, because I'm Dalton Ventures. The silence that followed was absolutely delicious. Barrett's face went through approximately 7 shades of red before settling on a lovely burgundy that matched the restaurant's decor. Clarissa's mouth opened and closed like a particularly startled goldfish. The waiter, who'd been approaching with menus, did an immediate 180 and disappeared back into the kitchen. You're... what? Clarissa finally managed, her voice hitting a pitch that probably bothered dogs in a 3-block radius. Dalton Ventures, I repeated, enjoying every syllable. The LLC that saved Jasper's consulting firm from complete collapse. That would be me. Well, technically it's my company, but semantics. Barrett's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his scotch. That's impossible. The investor was, we were told, anonymous? Yes, I prefer it that way. Keeps things clean, professional. I smiled sweetly. Though I have to say, this lunch is making me reconsider my anonymity policy. Clarissa's brain was clearly working overtime, trying to reconcile the Target dress-wearing barista in front of her with someone who had $2.5 million to throw around. But you work at a coffee shop, she said weakly, like maybe saying it again would make it true. I do. I enjoy it. The latte art is very zen. I paused for effect. Also, I don't actually need the money. My father was David Dalton. He founded EdTech Solutions. Maybe you've heard of it. Sold it to Pearson for $300 million when I was 23. My inheritance was substantial. The color drained from Barrett's face so fast I briefly worried he might pass out into his $18 Caesar salad. David Dalton? He repeated faintly. The David Dalton. The very same. Great guy. Terrible at golf, but excellent at building software empires. I took a sip of water. He always taught me to live below my means and invest wisely, hence the coffee shop job, keeps me grounded, and the strategic business investments, like, say, a promising consulting firm that was about to tank due to some unfortunate cash flow problems. Clarissa had recovered enough to attempt damage control, her voice taking on that syrupy quality again. Well, this is wonderful news. We had no idea. Jasper never mentioned that you came from such a prominent family. Because I asked him not to, I interrupted. I wanted to make sure he loved me for me, not my bank account. Radical concept, I know. The irony wasn't lost on anyone at the table. Here they were, having invited me to lunch specifically to tell me I wasn't good enough because of my perceived lack of money, only to discover I had more of it than they'd ever dreamed. Barrett cleared his throat. His signature move, apparently, and tried a different approach. Look, Maeve, we may have come across a bit harsh, but you have to understand, we're just looking out for our son. Parents worry. It's what we do. Of course, I said agreeably. I totally get it. That's why you invited me here to tell me I should reconsider marrying Jasper because I'm too poor. Because you care. Clarissa winced. We didn't say poor. You said there was a financial incompatibility. That I couldn't provide the lifestyle Jasper deserves. That I don't come from a similar background. I ticked off each point on my fingers. Which, for the record, is hilarious. Because Jasper's business would literally not exist right now without my money. About that, Barrett said, and I could see him shifting into businessman mode. The investment, the terms. We should discuss. Oh, absolutely. Let's discuss. I pulled out my phone, opening the email app. I have the contracts right here if you'd like to review them. Very standard venture capital agreement. $2.5 million in exchange for 35% equity. With, and this is the fun part, performance clauses. Barrett's eye twitched. Performance clauses. If the company fails to meet certain benchmarks, quarterly revenue targets, client retention rates, that sort of thing, my equity percentage increases. Proportionally. It's all very legal and above board. My lawyer is fantastic. Went to Yale. The implications were sinking in, and I could see the exact moment Clarissa realized what this meant. So you could potentially own a controlling interest in Jasper's company? Yep. If the performance metrics aren't met, and I have quarterly reports that suggest they're cutting it pretty close, I could end up with 51%. Maybe more, depending on how the next review goes. I didn't mention that I'd been carefully monitoring the business for months, or that I'd already prepared a restructuring plan in case I needed to take over. Knowledge is power, and I was sitting on a nuclear arsenal. Barrett looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Clarissa had gone very still, the way people do when they realize they've made a catastrophic error in judgment. This is all a lot to process, Clarissa said carefully, clearly trying to salvage something from this train wreck. Perhaps we should start over. Fresh slate. We obviously got off on the wrong foot. Did we? I asked innocently. Because from where I'm sitting, you got exactly what you wanted. A frank discussion about financial compatibility. You just didn't expect the math to work out quite this way. The waiter chose that moment to return, bless his heart, completely oblivious to the mushroom cloud of awkwardness at our table. Are we ready to order? Actually, I said, standing up and smoothing my $15 Target dress. I think I've lost my appetite. But please order whatever you'd like. It's on me. Consider it a small token of appreciation for this illuminating conversation. Barrett started to protest. Maeve, wait. Oh, one more thing. I paused, hand on my purse. Those performance reviews I mentioned? They're coming up in 2 weeks. I'll be conducting them personally, as is my right as the primary investor. I'm sure Jasper's been keeping excellent records. He's very thorough. It's one of the things I love about him. The subtext was clear. I'd be examining every aspect of the business with a microscope, and they knew it. Clarissa's voice was almost pleading. You won't tell Jasper about this lunch, will you? He doesn't need to know that we had concerns. Oh, I'm absolutely telling Jasper, I said cheerfully. He's meeting me for coffee in half an hour. I'm sure he'll find it fascinating that his parents were so worried about his financial future that they tried to break up his engagement. Real touching, actually. Very parental. I left them sitting there in their expensive clothes at their expensive table in their expensive restaurant. Both of them probably calculating how much this lunch was going to cost them. Not in dollars, but in influence. The autumn air outside felt crisp and perfect. I pulled out my phone and texted Jasper. Change of plans. Meet me at Cosmic Coffee instead of dinner tonight. We need to talk. Bring your business records for the last 6 months. His response came immediately. Everything okay? Better than okay, I typed back. Just had lunch with your parents. Super enlightening. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, oh no. What did they do? See you at 6, I sent. And babe, bring wine. You're going to need it. Cosmic Coffee was packed when I arrived at 5:30, the usual pre-dinner crowd fighting over outlets and the good seats by the window. My co-worker, Deshawn, was behind the bar looking frazzled, so I did what any decent human being would do. I jumped behind the counter and started helping. "Girl, you're off today," he protested, but he was already sliding a ticket my way. "Yeah, but you look like you're drowning, and I need something to do with my hands before my brain explodes." I started pulling espresso shots on autopilot. Also, I just had the most insane lunch with my future in-laws. Scale of 1 to 10, how bad? They basically told me to break up with Jasper because I'm too poor. Deshawn's jaw dropped. They did not. Oh, they absolutely did. Then I told them I'm the anonymous investor who saved their son's entire business with $2.5 million. He nearly dropped the oat milk. "You're kidding." I wish I was kidding. It would make better fiction. I finished a cappuccino with a perfect rosetta. Muscle memory is a beautiful thing. "He's coming here at 6. I have no idea how to even start this conversation. Maybe with, 'Hey babe, your parents are the worst.' That's definitely making the highlight reel." By the time Jasper walked through the door at exactly 6 o'clock, punctual as always, I'd made roughly 17 lattes and had nearly convinced myself this conversation wasn't going to be a complete disaster. Nearly. He looked worried. Jasper's a good-looking guy in that classic prep school way. Sandy brown hair, blue eyes, the kind of build that comes from actually using a gym membership. He was still wearing his work clothes, charcoal slacks and a blue button-down, and carrying a leather messenger bag that I knew contained his laptop and probably every business document I'd requested. "Maeve," he said, spotting me immediately. "What happened? Your text scared me." I poured 2 cold brews and gestured to the back corner table, the one employees used for breaks. "Sit. This is going to take a minute." To his credit, Jasper didn't interrupt once while I recounted the entire lunch. His expression went from confused to horrified, to something that looked like he wanted to sink through the floor and disappear forever. "They said that to you," he repeated when I finished. "My parents actually told you to break up with me because of money." In those exact words, yes. Well, Clarissa tried to dress it up with concern trolling about compatibility and your standard of living, but yeah, that was the gist. He dropped his head into his hands. "I'm so sorry. I knew they could be snobs, but this is— God, Maeve, I'm so sorry. Here's the thing, though." I slid a folder across the table. "I need you to be honest with me about something. And I mean brutally honest, because this affects both of us." He looked up, confused. "Okay. Dalton Ventures, the LLC that invested in your company 6 months ago. Did you know it was me?" Jasper blinked. "What? The $2.5 million that saved your business. Did you know I was the investor?" His face went completely blank. No, that's impossible. How would you—" Understanding dawned slowly, then all at once. "The inheritance. Your father. You never told me the exact amount. 300 million sale. I got 15%. Do the math. Of $45 million. He said it like he was testing out a foreign language. "You have $45 million. Had. I've made some investments. But yes, thereabouts." I opened the folder showing him the contracts. "I set up Dalton Ventures 3 years ago as my investment vehicle. When I heard through the grapevine, thank you Austin Tech community gossip, that your firm was struggling, I approached your business manager anonymously. I wanted to help, but I also wanted to make sure we kept our relationship separate from business." Jasper was reading through the contracts, his expression unreadable. "These performance clauses are standard venture capital terms? Yes, but they're also very strict. Jasper, you've been missing your quarterly targets for the last 2 periods. Do you know what that means?" He went pale. "My equity percentage decreases, and mine increases proportionally. As of right now, I own 38% of your company. If next quarter's numbers don't improve, and I've seen your preliminary reports they won't, I'll hit 42%. The quarter after that, if trends continue," I let the implication hang, "you'll have controlling interest." His voice was flat. "I will. And here's what your parents don't know, what you don't know, and what I discovered by doing some very thorough due diligence over the past few weeks." I pulled out my laptop, opening a spreadsheet that had taken me 40 hours to compile. "Your business manager, Curtis Fletcher, has been embezzling from you." Jasper's head snapped up. "What?" "Small amounts at first, A few thousand here and there, categorized as operational expenses or client entertainment. But it's been escalating. In the last 6 months alone, he's siphoned off nearly $200,000. I turned the laptop so he could see. Line by line, transaction by transaction, I'd tracked Curtis's theft. Fake vendor invoices, inflated expense reports, client payments that mysteriously never made it to the company account. He's been working there for 4 years, Jasper said, his voice hollow. He was at my college roommate's wedding. I trusted him. I know. And that's exactly why he thought he could get away with it. I pulled up another document. But here's the interesting part. Curtis didn't act alone. He had help from someone with access to your parents' financial information. Someone who knew exactly when you'd be desperate enough to accept outside investment, and who made sure that investment looked like your only option. Jasper's eyes widened. No, you're not suggesting. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm showing you facts. I pulled up email records, legally obtained through a forensic accountant I'd hired. Your mother has been in regular contact with Curtis for 18 months. And 3 months before your business nearly collapsed, she transferred $50,000 to an offshore account registered to his wife's maiden name. The silence stretched between us like taffy. I watched Jasper process the information, saw the moment it clicked into place. She sabotaged my business, he said quietly. My own mother sabotaged my business so I'd be, what, dependent on them? So I'd have to come crawling back? Or so you'd break up with the unsuitable girlfriend when the stress got too high, I added gently. I don't think she expected an anonymous investor to sweep in and save the day. That wasn't part of her plan. Jasper stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, South Congress was alive with its usual Tuesday evening energy. Tourists taking photos, food trucks setting up, the perpetual construction that seemed to follow Austin everywhere. What do I do? He asked finally. That depends. I closed my laptop. What do you want to do? He turned back to me, and I saw something new in his expression. Not the easygoing guy I'd fallen for, but something harder, more determined. I want to fix this. All of it. The business, my parents, Curtis, everything. He sat back down, reaching for my hands across the table. But I need your help. Not just your money. Your actual help. I was hoping you'd say that. I smiled. Because I've already drafted a complete restructuring plan. We fire Curtis, obviously. Press charges. Embezzlement is a felony. We bring in a new business manager, someone I've already vetted. We implement new financial controls and oversight. And we have a very long, very uncomfortable conversation with your parents about boundaries and what happens when they cross them. They're going to freak out. Oh, absolutely. It's going to be spectacular. I squeezed his hands. But here's what they don't realize. By trying to control your life, by trying to drive us apart, they've actually just handed us all the ammunition we need to take complete control of your business and your future. Jasper laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. My mother is going to lose her mind. Probably. But here's the thing. She technically works for me now. Well, for your company, which I'm about to own controlling interest in. Which means if she wants to keep having influence over family affairs, she's going to have to play very, very nice. Understanding lit up Jasper's face. You're going to use the business as leverage. I prefer to think of it as establishing healthy boundaries with consequences. I grinned. But yes, corporate structure is a beautiful thing when wielded correctly. The confrontation happened on a Friday afternoon in late October, exactly 2 weeks after my lunch with the Ramseys. We'd spent those 2 weeks gathering evidence, consulting with lawyers, and watching Curtis Fletcher dig his hole deeper while thinking he was still getting away with it. Jasper had called an emergency board meeting, which, given that his company was still small, consisted of him, Curtis, and 2 other senior consultants. What Curtis didn't know was that I'd be attending as the primary investor, along with my lawyer, Marcus Bennett, and a forensic accountant named Patricia Goldstein, who had a reputation for making embezzlers cry. The meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock at Jasper's office in the Domain, one of those modern glass buildings that looks impressive, but has terrible parking. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in what I called my corporate warrior outfit. A tailored black pantsuit from Nordstrom that had actually cost real money, heels that added 3 inches to my height, and my hair pulled back in a sleek bun that meant business. Curtis was already in the conference room, looking smug and comfortable. He was a guy in his late 30s, prematurely balding, with the kind of confidence that comes from never being caught. When I walked in with my legal team, his expression shifted to confused. "Who's this?" he asked Jasper. "Curtis Fletcher. Meet Maeve Dalton, primary investor and owner of 38% of this company." Jasper's voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. "Also, my fiancé. But I'm guessing you knew that second part already." Curtis's face went carefully blank. "I don't understand why we need lawyers for a standard board meeting." "Oh, this isn't standard," I said cheerfully, taking a seat at the head of the table. Marcus and Patricia flanked me, both opening laptops with the synchronized precision of people who'd done this before. "This is what we call a come to Jesus meeting. Though given what we're about to discuss, maybe Judgment Day is more appropriate." Patricia pulled up a presentation on the big screen. "Mr. Fletcher, we've conducted a comprehensive audit of all company financial transactions for the past 4 years. Would you like to guess what we found?" The color drained from Curtis's face. "I don't know what you think." $217,462, Marcus interrupted, his voice flat and professional. "Embezzled over 48 months through fake vendor invoices, inflated expense reports, and redirected client payments. We have documentation for every transaction. Bank records, email correspondence, falsified receipts, everything." Curtis stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. I'm not sitting here and listening to these accusations." "Sit down," Jasper said quietly. "Or I call the police right now. Your choice." Curtis sat. I'd never seen someone's bravado deflate so quickly. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued, pulling out a folder thick with documents. "Option 1, you resign immediately, sign a confession, and agree to repay every cent you stole plus 20% interest. In exchange, we won't press criminal charges. You'll be broke, your reputation will be ruined, and you'll never work in finance again. But you won't go to prison." "Option 2? Curtis asked weakly. "We prosecute. Embezzlement over $200,000 is a second-degree felony in Texas. You're looking at 2 to 20 years in state prison." Marcus smiled, and it wasn't friendly. "The DA is a personal friend of mine. She loves cases like this." "You can't prove—" Curtis started. Patricia spun her laptop around, showing him page after page of evidence. "Mr. Fletcher, I've been doing forensic accounting for 23 years. I've testified in 47 criminal trials. I can absolutely prove it. In fact, I can prove it so thoroughly that your lawyer will advise you to take a plea deal within the first 5 minutes of reading my report." The fight went out of Curtis completely. "What do I have to do?" "Sign here, here, and here." I slid papers across the table. "Resignation effective immediately. Confession of embezzlement. Repayment plan. We're giving you 10 years, which is generous considering you could be in prison. And one more thing." I pulled out another document. "This is a sworn statement naming your accomplice, Clarissa Ramsey." Curtis's eyes went wide. "She'll destroy me." "She was going to anyway," Jasper said coldly. "You think my mother keeps loose ends? The second this came to light, you'd be the scapegoat. At least this way. You have a chance at rebuilding your life eventually." Curtis read through the documents with shaking hands. "If I sign this, if I name her, she'll come after me." "Let her try," I said. "I have more money than God and lawyers on retainer. You sign this, you cooperate fully, and you're under my protection. Professional courtesy among people who've been screwed over by the same snake." It took Curtis 20 minutes to read everything, another 10 to fully comprehend what he was signing, and about 30 seconds to actually put pen to paper once he realized he had no other choice. "Smart decision," Marcus said, collecting the signed documents. "You'll receive a copy of everything via email within the hour. Don't leave town." Curtis left the conference room looking like he'd aged a decade. The moment the door closed behind him, Jasper let out a breath he'd apparently been holding. "One down," he said. "One to go," I agreed. "Ready for the main event?" We'd invited Clarissa and Barrett to dinner that evening at Eddie V's, another upscale restaurant. because apparently the Ramseys only communicated in establishments with prefix menus. They arrived at 7 sharp, Clarissa wearing enough diamonds to finance a small country, and Barrett looking like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. Jasper Maeve? Clarissa air-kissed near my cheeks without actually making contact. This is a lovely surprise. Are we celebrating something? You could say that, Jasper replied, his voice eerily calm. We're celebrating new beginnings, and the end of old patterns. Once we were seated and had ordered, Clarissa insisted on the most expensive wine, naturally. Jasper pulled out a folder identical to the one we'd shown Curtis. Mom? Dad? I need to show you something, he began. It's about Curtis Fletcher, and about some financial irregularities in my business. Clarissa's smile didn't waver, but I saw her grip tighten on her wine glass. Oh? What kind of irregularities? The embezzlement kind, I said pleasantly. $200,000 over 4 years. Curtis confessed this afternoon. Signed a full statement. Barrett frowned. That's terrible, son. You must feel betrayed. Oh, I do, Jasper interrupted. Especially since Curtis didn't act alone. He had help. From someone who had access to family financial information and who knew exactly when to make my business vulnerable enough that I'd have to accept outside investment. Clarissa's face went carefully neutral. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Really? I pulled out my phone, opening an email chain. Because we have 18 months of correspondence between you and Curtis. We have bank records showing you transferred $50,000 to an offshore account 3 months before Jasper's business nearly collapsed. We have testimony from Curtis himself describing how you orchestrated the whole thing. The silence at our table was deafening. Around us, the restaurant hummed with normal Friday evening energy. Couples celebrating, business dinners, someone's birthday party in the corner. But at our table, the temperature had dropped to Arctic levels. You can't prove any of that, Clarissa said finally, but her voice shook. Actually, we can, Marcus said, appearing at the table as if summoned. He placed another thick folder in front of Barrett. Every email, every transaction, every phone call. It's all documented. Mrs. Ramsey sabotaged her own son's business to try to break up his relationship. That's not just unethical. It's criminal conspiracy to commit fraud. Barrett opened the folder, his face growing paler with each page. Clarissa, tell me this isn't true. I was protecting him, Clarissa hissed. From her. From making a mistake that would ruin his life. You were protecting your own ego, Jasper cut in. You couldn't stand that I chose someone you didn't approve of. Someone who didn't come from your social circle, who didn't perform wealth the way you think it should be performed. I have money, I added helpfully. More than you, actually. I just don't feel the need to broadcast it with designer labels and country club memberships. I thought that would have been clear after our last lunch. Clarissa's composure finally cracked. You're making a huge mistake. Both of you. This will ruin our family. No, Mom, Jasper said quietly. You already did that. We're just deciding what happens next. Barrett closed the folder slowly. What do you want? Complete divestment from my business and my life, Jasper said. You sell back any informal stake you think you have. You stop interfering. You respect my choices and my relationship, or you don't get to be part of either. And the evidence? Clarissa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Stays sealed as long as you cooperate, I said. Step out of line, try to manipulate or control or interfere in any way, and it all goes to the DA. Your choice. Barrett looked at his wife with an expression I couldn't quite read. Disappointment, maybe. Or just exhaustion. We'll agree to your terms. Barrett, Clarissa started. Clarissa, enough. It was the first time I'd heard him contradict her. We've lost. Accept it with whatever grace you have left. They left before the entrees arrived. Clarissa walking out with her head high but her hands trembling. Barrett paused at the table, placing a hand briefly on Jasper's shoulder. I'm sorry, son, he said quietly, for all of it. Then they were gone, and Jasper and I were left sitting in an expensive restaurant with justice served cold and a future that was finally, completely our own. Well, I said, picking up my wine glass, that went better than expected. Jasper laughed, the tension finally breaking. Only you would call that better than expected. Nobody cried, nobody got arrested, and we still have dinner reservations. I clinked my glass against his. I'm calling it a win. 3 months later, I'm standing behind the espresso machine at Cosmic Coffee on a Tuesday morning in January, making a vanilla latte for a regular who tips in exact change, and thinking about how funny life is when you stop trying to perform it for other people. Jasper's business is thriving. Turns out, when you're not hemorrhaging money to an embezzler, profit margins improve dramatically. Who knew? We brought in a new business manager, a woman named Rita Morrison who has a background in corporate finance and a personality that makes grown men cry during budget meetings. She's fantastic. Curtis Fletcher is working at a car wash in San Antonio, paying back his debt in monthly installments that'll continue until he's 53 years old. I hear he's very thorough with the tire shine. Patricia's report was so devastating that even his own lawyer recommended he take our deal. Sometimes I almost feel bad for him. Almost. Then I remember he stole from my fiancé and helped sabotage his business, and the sympathy evaporates like steam from this cappuccino I'm making. As for Clarissa and Barrett, that's where things get interesting. They kept their word about backing off, mostly because the alternative was prison time and social humiliation. Barrett actually reached out to Jasper in December, suggesting coffee, not at some fancy restaurant, just regular coffee. They talked for 2 hours. I wasn't there, but Jasper said his father apologized, really apologized, not the "I'm sorry you feel that way" kind, but the "I was wrong and I failed you" kind. They're working on rebuilding something. It's slow, it's awkward, but it's real. Clarissa, on the other hand, is working on her memoir. I'm not kidding. She's apparently framing her life story as a cautionary tale about the dangers of social climbing and perfectionism. Her book club friends are very supportive. She still can't quite look me in the eye during family events, which we've now had exactly 2 of: Thanksgiving and Christmas. Both were spectacularly uncomfortable in that way that makes you appreciate why people invented alcohol for holiday gatherings. The wedding is planned for May, spring in Austin, before it gets unbearably hot. We're doing it at Jasper's favorite coffee roastery, because of course we are, with about 60 people and a food truck reception. Clarissa nearly had a stroke when we told her. Barrett just laughed. My wedding dress cost $300 from a boutique on South Congress. My shoes are comfortable. The flowers are wildflowers from a local farm. Clarissa suggested Vera Wang and a reception at the country club. I suggested she remember who signs the checks that keep her lifestyle afloat, and she dropped it. That sounds harsh, but here's the thing I've learned. Some people only understand power dynamics. Clarissa spent her whole life wielding money and social status like weapons, so that's the only language she comprehends. I don't enjoy holding financial leverage over my future mother-in-law, but I also don't lose sleep over it. She made her choices. I'm just making sure they have consequences. Deshaun asked me last week why I still work here, now that everything's out in the open. You've got millions, girl. Why are you still pulling espresso shots? It's a fair question. The truth is, I like the routine. I like the customers, even the difficult ones. I like the smell of fresh ground coffee and the satisfaction of making the perfect microfoam. I like being Maeve the barista, not Maeve the heiress, or Maeve the investor, or Maeve the woman who destroyed her in-laws' carefully constructed social facade. Plus, the health insurance is pretty good. I've increased my stake in Jasper's company to 41% now. Those performance clauses don't pause just because we're getting married. We're talking about me taking a more active role in operations, maybe joining the board officially. Rita thinks I should. Jasper thinks I should. I'm considering it, but only if I can keep my Tuesday and Thursday morning shifts at the coffee shop. Balance. You know? The most surprising development? Clarissa's younger sister, Lorraine, called me in December. She'd heard the whole story through family gossip, because of course she had, and wanted to take me to lunch. Real lunch, not the ambush variety. Turns out Lorraine had been pushed out of family events for years because she married a teacher instead of a lawyer. She wanted to thank me for, in her words, finally putting Clarissa in her place. We're getting brunch next week. I like her. Here's what nobody tells you about standing up for yourself. It's not a one-time thing. It's not a single confrontation where you drop the mic and everything's perfect forever. It's a daily choice to set boundaries, to refuse manipulation, to value yourself enough to walk away from people who don't. Even family. Especially family. I thought exposing Clarissa and Curtis would feel more triumphant, more dramatic, like some kind of movie ending with a slow clap and swelling music. Instead, it just felt like closing a door that should have been closed a long time ago. And then getting on with life. Jasper proposed again 2 weeks ago. I know we're already engaged, but he said he wanted to do it right this time, knowing everything, with no secrets between us. He took me to Mount Bonnell at sunset, which is impossibly touristy but also genuinely beautiful, and asked me to marry him with full knowledge of who I am. The coffee shop worker, the secret millionaire, the woman who will absolutely destroy anyone who threatens the people she loves. I said yes. Again. Because apparently, I'm a sucker for romantic gestures, and men who can admit when their families are a hot mess. The latte I'm making is ready. I hand it to the customer, accept his $2.37 in exact change, and smile. Because this, right here, is exactly where I want to be. Rich, caffeinated, and completely unbothered.